Hey folks, welcome back. It's good to have you here. And I'm excited to introduce you to our guest today, who is Peter Mary. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Forrest. Good to be here.
I'm going to hold up for anyone who's tuning in via video. I'm going to hold up two of your books here. They're a little blurry because I have my Zoom blur my background on, but Leading from the Field and Volution, Philosophy of Reconnection. So you are an author of several books. You're co-founder of Ubiquity University and founder of Wyrd Experiences. It's actually WYRD, gowyrd.org, right? Is that the website? Yeah, okay. And you've got one of your Wyrd Experiences, Wyrd Technologies sitting behind you, one of the lamps you've built. So, warm welcome. I feel in great company. This is, as I was just telling you before we got started, this is a field first podcast. So we always take a moment at the beginning to invite the both of us and also all of our listeners to have a moment to relax and um, allow ourselves to drop into to be resourced and even recreated by the field that we're in relationship from in this recording. So welcome to you, welcome to our listeners, and yeah, thanks for being here.
Welcome to the field.
Welcome to the field.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you experience as you say, welcome to the field.
Um, it's really a reminder. So it's a kind of, uh, well, definitely relaxation, but a kind of, stuff drops away because there is only uh, us in the field, really. So, yeah. So then a more kind of grounding, I think, coming more present. Uh, yeah. Because you don't actually have to do anything, which is a relief from all the doing the rest of the day. Yeah.
What I love about your work, Peter, I mean, there's so many things. I'm just going to name one of them. And I'm still getting to know you in a lot of ways. So I feel like I've got a sliver of the pie, and what I've seen so far, I really enjoy. Uh, but yeah, the orientation of actually leading from the field. In my world, I call it a field first approach, or field leadership. And this, from what I've seen in your work, seems to be a deeply resonant orientation we have, which is not just exploring these things conceptually or in meditation, but actually bringing them in applied contexts and exploring what it's like to get off the meditation pillow and into the marketplace with these ways of doing things. So yeah, just so curious about you and how you've gotten to here and um,
Mm. Well, yeah, the field, piece really was we were working with a group over here very much informed by integral theory and spiral dynamics, which is this kind of developmental value systems. And we got a contract from the Dutch government to work with about 20 organizations around maternal and newborn health in what we call mesh working, which is a kind of way of weaving all these different organizations together to try to achieve results they couldn't achieve on their own. And we sat back at some point, it was going okay, but we were kind of sitting there going, feels like we're trying to match complexity with complexity. And like we were like, there must be something the other side of this complexity, the simplicity, the other side of the complexity. And as we kind of went around, and dropped into that, some people were doing Reiki healing, some people, like I was, into the earth energies and things. And we realized that everybody was somehow doing some kind of level of energetic work in their own worlds, like as a hobby, but wasn't really kind of trying to integrate it into their work and their practice. And we all shared an understanding of this map of spiral dynamics of these value systems. For people who don't know, that we were operating out of this, what they call the integral level, which is really taking all the parts you can find in the system and trying to stitch them together like into a functional whole. And the level beyond that, that they call holistic as opposed to integral, is which is the turquoise color code, is that you start from the whole rather than from the parts. And the parts, if you can hold the whole, the parts kind of organize themselves in a dynamic, energetic web system, basically. And it's a very like different approach. And it was that, I think, that was kind of what tipped me into it. Because I realized that what we were really doing is in this task of like these 20 organizations, we'd really kind of reached the level, the limit of our cognitive approaches, because it was so complex. All these players, all these organizers got their own different cultures and systems, and trying to get them to work together and everything. And this meshworks approach that Don Beck developed, is probably the best you could do from this. And he often described it as a kind of engineering approach. But there was a realization at some point that the complexity is so great that you can't actually grasp it with your rational mind. You kind of reach the limits of it, even in terms of systems thinking, that you can't map the system as a whole because there's so many different things going on. And therefore, you can't say, okay, now I've mapped the system. If I do this, that's going to happen. You can't, that kind of predictability is an illusion. And so once you accept that, like once you accept that your cognitive mind can't actually grasp the complexity of reality and therefore can't take very informed decisions about what to do next, you have to source another form of knowing. And that's much more the intuitive knowing. That was kind of what dawned on me. And it was a massive relief, really, because it simplified everything. It was like, okay, so I don't need to understand it all. I don't need a whole roadmap and a plan of how we're going to solve this and what happens, because all you can do is sense the system as a whole right now and get a feel for what feels like the next right step to take that step fully, and then sense again. So there's no kind of planning in that. There's like a tuning into the field of the system, getting a download, acting on it, and then tuning in again. It's kind of sense, act, sense, act, sense, act. And that's just a massive shift, from our Western kind of linear planning way of doing things. And that's when I really started working very consciously in this approach of how to work with in from the field. And so having written Evolutionary Leadership, which was the first book back in 2003 that has integral theory and spiral dynamics and theory U and all of this stuff in it, I then swung kind of to, which I could say is the yellow integral book, and then swung to Leading from the Field, which is really the turquoise holistic book, which is much more about if we accept that everything with a name and a boundary, an organization, a system, whatever, has an energetic architecture to it, like an energetic field full of information. And that if we can get that field to be more coherent, so remove blocked and stressed energies, make sure it's connected to the right sources of information it needs, a number of different elements around kind of energy fields, really. Then what happens is the system starts to look after itself. It starts to self-organize. And I'd kind of built these architectures, or I was trying to work out how do we describe this to people? Because I've worked in corporate and government land, and it was like, well, look, we got the physical architecture, which is this world, we work in with our business results and everything we can see around us. And what I think had been discovered the last 20 years was that if you get the relational architecture right in organizations, using things like the art of hosting or theory U or circling or whatever it is, then the material becomes, manifests a lot more effectively. So a lot of work the last 20 years has been on that relational level. But then there's another level, which is the energetic architecture. And if you get the energetic architecture coherent, the relationships kind of resolve themselves, and the energy flows through into the manifestation. And it doesn't mean you don't have to do anything. You've still got to work on the relationships and work in the material, but it all becomes a lot less effort and there's a lot more synchronicity. So from my perspective, it was like, okay, if we can learn to work at that level, then it means that we're likely to accelerate our impact on one hand. It's not, and then it's not us accelerating the impact, but the, the kind of natural intelligence will accelerate the impact. It'll be a lot less effort, and we'll be including a lot more of reality than if we're just thinking it up from our rational mind. And therefore, our chances of long-term success are going to be a lot higher. So that was the kind of, that's where I landed with it all. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, brilliant. I'm gonna give you some applause. You and everyone working together to do such beautiful work. It's so awesome to hear you. Yeah. And bring me and our listeners into this moment. I mean, where is your curiosity taking you in your work now?
Yeah, I mean, really evolving kind of from that moment, this realization that the foundations of our challenge as a Western civilization is that we've forgotten the nature of our interconnectedness, fundamentally, right? If we hadn't forgotten that and that was our experience, then we would never have been able to do what we've done to the planet and each other. It just wouldn't have made any sense to act in that way. There would have been like a natural way of behaving that would have honored all life. But that's another kind of story we can go into later, if we want to, but we didn't. Um, and so the question is, how do we remind ourselves of our interconnectedness? And for me, I guess the word I would label that interconnectedness is consciousness. It's this phenomena which is a field of energy and information that we are and experience and permeates everything around us and connects us to everything else. And so that's really what I dove into. And it was a bunch of synchronicities that led me to the Princeton work, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab that ran for 28 years at Princeton, looking at how human intention or our inner states individually and collectively affect things in the world around us. To cut a long story short. And then I realized, okay, because I've done a lot of public speaking and that kind of thing, and when I'm on the stage talking about interconnectedness and consciousness, it will now make a big difference to be able to quote 28 years of research at Princeton, rather than just this guy having a nice idea. So that's there. I thought, okay, here's a bridge for the Western mind between this to use the science to bridge to the consciousness and at least allow our rational mind to open up to the possibility that there might be something there if there's actually data that seems to provide the evidence. And basically we ended up because the lab closed at Princeton in 2007. I knew Brenda Dunn, who was the psychologist there, and about 5 years ago, in one of those kind of magic mystery moments, she said, "We've got all this stuff still here in Princeton, with all the equipment, the library, the research journals, the data. Can you do anything with it?" It was a moment, it was one of those choiceless choices, right? A moment of no, all I could do was say yes. And the kind of yes I got, the picture I got when she asked it was a location that I just started working at in the north of England, an estate of 3,000 acres in the edge of the Yorkshire Dales. Absolutely beautiful. Been in this family for 1,000 years. And I was helping them transform it into a transformational retreat center and rewilding the whole estate and that kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, looks like what we need to do is take all this stuff out of storage, restore it, and create an experience center where people can walk in and have a direct experience of their interconnectedness, of their minds, hearts influencing these technologies that they developed at Princeton. So, through all various forms of miracle, that's what happened. And we now have what we call Wyrd experience, as you say, with a Y. established at the Broughton Sanctuary near Skipton in Yorkshire. And people can come in and they can interact with the technology that was developed at Princeton. And now the new technology that we've developed through Wyrd, that is like a wireless technology that responds to your inner state, individually and collectively. And so that's the part, when you say, I'm kind of like, what have you chosen to do? It's not really, doesn't feel like a choice. It's kind of like, okay, so this is the bit that's been given to me to try and manifest. Well, not even try, right? Try is the language is so hard. The moment you try, you lose it. So to kind of guide into being, as it were. And yeah, so that's what I'm devoting most of my time to is we have a research device called the Weirdoscope that you can put in a space and it'll basically track the field of consciousness during an event, and you can correlate fluctuations in the field with moments during the event. A number of universities are using it. Now, in fact, right at the moment, Harvard Medical School are using one to track a Sadhguru event out at his center in Tennessee. So it's really interesting. There's about 4 universities plus, people like Monroe Institute who'd obviously be into this, who are using it to do research. Kind of, wow, something must be shifting here. And so we developed that, but I really want to get stuff into the mainstream. So that's why we developed the Wyrd Light, which responds through brightness to fluctuations in the field. So that the bigger the effect in the field, the brighter the light, and then the different colors reflect different data structures. And people have found they can sit in front of it and make it turn the color they want, for which we have no proper scientific theory for. We just have people's experience at the moment. We know the scientific theory behind it going brighter. But when people started saying, "Oh, I can make it," I've been sitting in front of it and making it turn this color, not just one, but many people, and particularly kids. Then I was okay. Well, it doesn't surprise me, but I can't kind of claim that that's always going to be the case because we don't have the research behind it. So we're really trying to be disciplined about not making claims that we haven't done the scientific research on. But for me, where I'm at now is how we get these technologies into the world that are constantly reminding people of the nature of their interconnectedness. That's basically it, kind of fundamentally. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Mm.
And your light has been changing colors behind you throughout our podcast recording. So have you assigned different for anyone who's listening, if you're watching on video, there's a one of Peter's lights, one of the Go Weird lights behind him, and it's changing colors. At certain times it's emanating more light than others. So for people who are watching this on YouTube, what kind of information and meaning making can we take from what's happening with the light in the picture?
Yeah, I mean the brightness is the key one because that's likely to be when we're connected or we're having a conversation or we're saying something that has the most resonance, not just with us, but with everybody listening now, but also everybody listening in the future. So these things are non-linear, and these technologies are non-linear in terms of time and space, which we can go into later if we want. But so brightness is, in a way, you could say the synchronicity score. So the strength of the impact in the field at a certain time. The colors, like we have different data structures inside let's say the technology shows different data structures depending on the impact that something has on the field. And all we've done is link those data structures to colors. But what we don't know yet is what it is in human behavior, if there is any universal, that leads to those data structures and therefore leads to those colors. People share their stories. So from when we have a cozy family moment, it always seems to go purple, like some people would say. Others, there's something about a ritual space and it's staying green the whole time. So I did a thing with 250 druids on a call, and the kind of head druid set the space and the field, and it had been flickering back and forth before then. And then he set this space, and it just stayed permanently bright green during the whole time that he held that space. And then at the end, he did some other special connection thing, and it kind of flipped up to white. And then afterwards, when he closed the space, as it were, it just returned to its kind of random behavior. Um, but that is something we can't make, we can't say universally this color is a result of this. We don't know. And there may not even be universals. It may just be each person or group's experience in the moment that, triggers a certain pattern that may be unique to that moment in time and that context. So there's loads of research still to do, but the exciting thing is we've now got the technology to be able to do that research and find out, well, what does happen when we do this or that, or imagine like a light or a weirdoscope in someone's yoga studio or retreat center, and they notice when they do which exercise do you get the biggest effect. So when is the field respond the most? Um, so it's kind of like you can try things out and say, okay, maybe I'll try this little ritual or this little prayer or whatever it is you want, and then you can see the effect it has. And if you're doing things in a repeated way, you can get some really significant data on that. So it adds it's it's not the end in itself, right? It's a means to an end, and the end is greater awareness of our interconnectedness and this field of consciousness, and our exploration of it with each other. But we all have subjective and intersubjective experiences where we go, "Oh, that was a great moment," or "I really felt it then." The group really kind of clicked in then, which is a very valid data point. And it's good to have like another data point that can correlate or say, oh, maybe that was just your wishful thinking, because nothing did seem to happen at that point. So it provides a way of, just being able to reflect more consciously on our experiences and the effects that they're having, I think.
I'm with the earlier you mentioned it's tracking non-linearly moments from the future, moments that are regardless of when people listen to this podcast and where they listen to this podcast, that the light can
Mhm.
feel them and take in information from them, which is often my experience on this podcast. There's a non-local and right, consciousness is timeless. So we have space and time inside of consciousness manifesting from consciousness. And um, I'm curious if you've built a timeless technology here.
I like the idea of a timeless technology. Um, it's, I mean, basically, things that happen in the information field, right? And the way I think about it is it's all information carried on energy waves, basically. But what the research shows is that all exists kind of outside of the linear time. So the remote perception work they did at Princeton and that we do at the Science and Consciousness event that we run every year up at Broughton, one of the partners will send an image or something they're looking at back to their other partner, and the other partner will try to pick it up and will write or draw something, just impressions that they're getting, and there's pretty accurate hits, where you can say, oh well, that's clearly what the person was looking at, what you drew just then. But what we do is we have them send the image we have them pick up the image about 30 minutes before the person even has chosen what they're going to send. And that's what really kind of blows people's minds. And that's that. They actually found in the Princeton research that it was a little bit more successful doing it outside of linear time than in the normal linear time. Or we had at Science and Consciousness a couple of years ago on time, we had this researcher who found that if you're preparing for an event, like you would train to perform well, or an exam or something like that, you'd normally train in advance to perform better on the task. That also, if people trained afterwards, it made them better at the task than if they didn't train at all. And that, that still fries my mind. So I'm like, wait a minute, so everything that happens in the future affects what happens in the present. And the problem with that is that that's thinking linearly, and it's not linear. I think it was Einstein who was like, "Time's not a river; it's places in space."
Mhm.
So it's just a very different. So yeah, at the moment, you could, to follow Einstein's thing, all of your listeners in the future are just at a different space, a different place in space at the moment, but still connected to the same field. And so the technology is registering all of that. Yeah.
For me, I mean, you used developmental theory earlier, so orange is Newtonian physics. When you get into fourth person perspective, like
Mm.
pluralism, you get into relativity, which is Einstein. And then I mean, we're speaking about the field of consciousness. We're speaking about turquoise and later, which is at least, quantum mechanics. I mean,
Yeah.
we're still in this question of what bridges fifth dimensional physics and third dimensional physics, right? And fourth dimensional physics as well. We haven't quite solved this the mechanics of that, but
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, the technology, I say, sits in the veil between the unmanifest and the manifest,
Mhm.
literally taking what's happening in the unmanifest and turning it into electronic output. That you can do many things with. So we've got ideas for, gaming that you can influence with your mind, to concerts where the field of the crowd is turned into art displays, live. I mean, the possibilities are huge. And it's, for me, it's like, okay, how do we reach as many people with this? So it short circuits their rational materialist mind and makes them ask fundamental questions. Like we had a CEO the other day come into Wyrd Experience, a Cambridge physics graduate with the group, and he was pretty skeptical at the beginning, and then he sat down in front of one of the old Princeton games where you have a line running across the screen, and you have to try to make the line go up or down the screen, which is equivalent to more ones or zeros in the random data. And he was like, "Okay, I'm going to make it go up." Like you have to say at the beginning which way you're going to make it go, um, so that they can check the correlation. And the line started to go up, and then halfway through, he was like, "Okay, I'm going to trick it now, and I'm going to make it go down." Like, and of course, the line did plummet down the screen, and that was it. That's all it took, like 2 minutes of experience. That's why we were like Wyrd experience for him to go. Why wasn't I taught this at Cambridge? What the hell is going on here? I can't deny anymore that something happened here that we don't have theory or explanations for in Western science. And that's the kind of thing we want to happen. And then people go, okay, well, how can I be more effective at this? Or how can I? And then it's, oh, well, that's where you've got to do your inner work. It's all about presence and playfulness and curiosity and non-attachment and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets me curious if your devices can track any kind of distinction between um, shadow and light, right? Like, can it track the the unconscious? Can it track trauma? Can it track?
Mm. We don't know yet, but we have just developed a research proposal to explore whether we can identify structures in the data that relate to emotions.
Mhm.
So we're going to work with, in the proposal anyway, have a work with a group of actors who are method trained. So about, really being able to activate authentic emotions. And we'll have a weirdoscope and a light there. And then we'll run the data through AI to look for patterns and see indeed, do you see similar patterns around joy, different ones for fear, and then we'll start to be able to get some. Maybe we don't know, of course, it's an experiment, so we don't know. We have a hunch that it might well be the case, because we have started to see similar patterns when we run the Weirdoscope during the same ritual. So the same Tantra ritual, for example, that we've had the Weirdoscope out for about 10 different times. with different people, but the same ritual format. And we're starting to see that the data looks similar, even 2, 3 years apart, looks similar from that ritual. So that kind of makes you think, well, is there an energetic fingerprint, identifier for certain rituals or even pieces of music?
Mhm.
If you had a weirdoscope somewhere, the same Bach sonata, but different concert halls, would you see a similar structure in
Mhm.
the data? And we don't know, but the early signs are, and it would kind of make sense. It's like Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic fields. He talks about like these patterns in the field that the more set they are, or the more crystallized they are, the easier it is for people to follow them. It's like walking down if you're the first person to walk through a forest, make a path in the forest, then it's easier for the second person, even easier for the third, fourth, etc. So it would be no surprise to discover that there is like a fractal pattern in the information fields reflecting these particularly well trodden rituals, or well established pieces of music that imagine national anthems, maybe, those kind of things. But again, this is all, it's opening a whole new domain of research, which is exciting, I think, also for the younger generation, because it's like if you take the materialist worldview, it's like, what else is there to discover,
Right.
right? Science is, and we kind of discovered that we were on the planet. Now people are going, well, let's go into outer space. But wait a minute. So here's a whole new undiscovered territory. So we can all start to be explorers again. Now we have the tools to start to be able to do that. Then that kind of becomes exciting.
Yeah, the new frontier.
Yeah. Well, and exciting, and what it does is it invites people into a way of being that is much more aligned with, who we really are and the rest of life. So should be a far more creative and constructive presence on the planet as we kind of dive into that. Yeah. Because you can't, like, it doesn't work with the rational mind. Like, you can't sit in front of the light and go, turn red now. It doesn't. It's like it's because it's not, if you have in your mind that there's an iron in it, so there's me and there's the light, then it doesn't work because you've set up a separation, right? And if you're trying, it doesn't work as well because you've kind of injected a linearity into it. It's like, I'm going to make this do that. So it's much more of like an entanglement, like you mentioned quantum. It's much more like a feeling of being entangled with the light, and a playfulness and a curiosity that makes it respond, in which it doesn't, it's respond is even the wrong word. It reflects, because there is no time difference.
They're co-happening.
Yeah, exactly. Co-arising, as Ken, Wilber would say, co-arising. Exactly that. So that means that it's kind of training you to get out of this linear mindset and linear kind of cause and effect mindset into this playful presence, which is ultimately how consciousness unfolds, right? Yeah. Big Trojan horse, really.
Yeah. We need those. We need some Trojan horses. It's
And we certainly do, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But I do feel it's all accelerating at the moment when you see things like the telepathy tapes,
right.
podcast, millions of people.
Oh no, haven't they? It's amazing.
As it's like, and they've kind of raised money to be able to do a documentary and everything. So millions of people getting exposed to these very authentic stories of people just living from the field. And then Joe Rogan picks up on it, and then he's got Thomas Campbell on, and then he's got Hal Puthoff on, spending hours talking about consciousness. 2 million viewers, and whatever, what does he have? 20 million followers or something on his YouTube channel. It's like, okay, something is going on here. And then all the UAP stuff, disclosure in the US. And they're all people, the people who worked on it are coming out now and starting to talk about it. And they're saying, yeah, well, the communication is all telepathic, and it doesn't matter what language you speak. Same as the telepathy tapes kids are saying, like, it's beyond language, the communication. and any craft that we found seem to be driven by consciousness, because we can't reverse engineer. Like there's nothing there to reverse engineer. That's great. Like, oh, we make this engine. Oh, there's no engine, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. A really interesting time. It does feel to me like, I've been saying since I've been doing this stuff and giving talks on emergence since the early 2000s. And I always talk about, and there's going to be a non-linear emergence, right? As all of these emergences are, there's going to be breakdown and breakthrough in parallel. And the nature of these moments is that we can't see what's going to happen next from our current mindset. We can't even imagine it. Like it's non-linear in its quality. And I, I've always been saying, and we can't see it yet. We just don't know. We just have to keep putting in place the conditions, tuning in, and helping the breakdown gracefully, and putting in place conditions for breakthrough. But I think these are the early signals
Mm,
that of what I would call a consciousness-based civilization,
mm,
which will be much simpler, full of a lot more grace and joy. And we know we can kind of grow vegetables using our consciousness. We can grow food. I mean, they need the soil, but they don't need all the pesticides, because it's just the loving care and attention that we give them that actually helps them grow better. We know we can heal, with those modalities. Listening to the telepathy tapes, we know we don't even need to go to school. I mean, you just tune into the field with your question and boom, there it is. So, interesting. And solving any of the problems that we need. Same thing, right? If we try to do it rationally, we get caught up in all the complications. But what you need to do is ask. And then you get the download, and then obviously you need the technology, the skill, and the technical knowledge to be able to implement the solutions and things. But it could all be a lot simpler. And I think it'll feel radically different to the age of stupid, that we're kind of in at the moment. Yeah, yeah,
Well, and it's a simple. I've been using the word complexity lately. It's the simplicity on the other side of the complexity. It's simple, but it's not. I mean, who knows, right? I can't claim what the future is going to be, but I don't imagine it's going to be a regression back to the agrarian revolution simplicity. It's a simplicity on the other side of the complexity. I mean, there's obviously things like Go Weird experiences, Go Weird lamps. Um, these are the beginnings of a whole just plethora of technologies that could come online in these coming years that help us access more well-being, healing, awakening, flow, uh, creativity. It feels like that's the consciousness-based economy, right? I did I did a workshop with a Fortune 500 company last year, and at the end of the act, I led a journey for the group there, and at the end of it, somebody came up to me and said, what if every single person in the world who used one of our products or services experienced more well-being in their life as a consequence of interacting with our stuff? And I was going, yeah, here we go. Like that is the question for the emerging economy, for the consciousness economy.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There was there is these economic theories that look at cycles and of the economy, and name's gone out of my head now. It's like a was it?
Austrian business cycle theory.
Mm, it sounds like an East European name. Damn, it's gone out of my head. But basically looking at what drives the economy in different waves, and it's fairly established theory. But the coming wave he described as essentially individual and collective well-being is what will drive. It's been technology and things like that in the industrial age, and then the technology age and things. And but he wrote that quite a few years ago. But it's exactly what you were describing just now. And why? Well, because we've made such a mess of it. We're going to have to do a lot of healing of ourselves individually, collectively, and the planet moving forward. So, um, yeah, and it's really, I mean, these devices or the technologies that are around are just continuing to remind us of our true nature, of this interconnected being that we are that doesn't stop at the skin, basically, that kind of expands out around us, which means we have to take responsibility. You know, when I first realized that, I was, oh, so every thought,
Yep.
I have, it doesn't just stay here. You mean it radiates out into the field and affects everything else? Oh, I better kind of do my work. Yeah,
Every
yeah,
thought, every feeling, every impulse.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So when people ask me, "Are you hopeful about the future?" I'm like, wrong question somehow. You know,
I do.
like because hope, it's an interesting one. It's quite challenging actually for a lot of people because hope is still an attachment to something in the future. Some kind of, and I learned this through from Margaret Wheatley once. We were doing a session with her, and we were sitting in circle, and she said, "I want you to all go around. I want you to start with the word, complete the sentence, which starts with living without hope, and complete the sentence." And the first couple of rounds were like depressing, and then you dropped into something. You got this realization that actually it was immensely liberating. And so I'm like, it's about trust, not hope. Like all we because we don't know. And we can't know what's going to happen. The hope is still an attachment to something in the future,
Yeah.
whereas trust is something that brings you present. Because if you've got deep trust, then there's nothing to worry about in the future. But that does mean, addressing fundamental fears like the fear of death at its most fundamental. So if we still believe that everything ends, at the end, even if you do believe that, um, trust means that you have to kind of deal with that fear. Uh, because it's, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, here we're below sea level here in the Netherlands, let's say flooding, dikes, whatever worst thing that can happen. Okay, let's say you die. Okay, but what if, you know, and I once was I reading one, it was like book, it's called something of the White Clouds. It was a Tibetan book. And I remember reading this bit where they were like, if you're doing something in this life that is really close to your heart, that you really kind of feel it, then you will complete that work, whether it's in this lifetime or another. I was kind of, oh, dude, that's a relief, So I don't have to kind of get it all done now. So even if I was to die tomorrow, I'd come back and be able to continue the work. That was it's that kind of perspective. Another beautiful book that I read recently, called a really old one, called it's called the Book of Spirits or the Spirits Book. It was end of the 19th century, then the Spiritism movement, where they were, in the French cafes, people were sitting around and levitating tables and doing mediumship and all this kind of spooky stuff. And a bunch of them went round and they interviewed all these different mediums who didn't know each other. And they asked them all the same questions, like the really fundamental questions, like what happens before you're born, what happens based on your behavior during your life, what happens after you die, what are angels, all these fundamental questions. And basically, they all came back with the same answers. And what they did is they synthesized those answers and wrote them down in this book called the Spirits Book or Book of Spirits. And you read it, and sometimes you read things and you're kind of, oh yeah, that's obviously true. There's no question. The language is so clear, or the transmission in it is so clear. Kind of, yeah. And although it's couched a little bit in Christian terms, it's very much a universalist uh, kind of text, and it's all about describes the different dimensions of reality that we inhabit, what happens after we die, and why, and how, what manner we come back, and all. And you read and go, oh, yeah, well, that sounds completely normal, actually. And that kind of deals with the fear of death uh, thing as well. So that comes back to deep trust. Like if we're not worried about the future in any way, then great, we get to play in the present that way, which is all there really is. So why waste time being in the past or the future? given that they don't exist anyway. I have to laugh sometimes because we make it so hard for ourselves, you know. We make it so complicated, and yet it's really so easy. Just we have to peel off all the kind of layers of stuff that we've wrapped over the easiness. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's really is a daily practice. Because just I was saying earlier, the technology sits in the veil between the unmanifest and the manifest. Well, so do we. You know, literally in every moment. We are there, and the question is whether we're conscious of it, of being there. So everything we just talked about, you open your email inbox, you know, or your to-do list, or your plan for how you're going to get consciousness interactive technologies into the world. How you hold that that space of being able to be present and playful and curious, you know, sitting in that space in the veil whilst dealing with your email inbox and your, you know, colleagues and your investors and whatever else you have. That's the, but it certainly is a lot more effective when you do, which is really what the leading from the field is about. Like, here's 12 principles to help us lead from the veil, or keep our field as clear as possible. Funny because it's the less you try and the less that you do, the more that gets done somehow.
The paradox, and it is the case. I just flipped open your book, Leading from the Field, here to a random, maybe not so random page. Um, but I flipped it open to boundaries. So
Mm,
know the boundaries of your leadership. Know who and what are you accountable for. Be in authentic relationship with those you're accountable to.
mm, mm. Yeah, well, that is really you know, it's a good description of because we can't, you know, playing in the material, right? We've chosen to manifest in this material realm for some reason that I guess we gradually discover as we go through our life. But how you pull things through, or how you enable, facilitate things to come through the field into manifest form, that's the art. And bringing it into the 3D means we also need to be in 3D. Like, we need to be in, that means you need to be in your body, right? We can't be floating around up there. And to bring energy and information into any container in the manifest world, we need to know what those boundaries. We need, what are we talking about? Like when we say, okay, I want my organization to achieve this or whatever. what do you, when you say your organization, are you really clear on what that is? Because that is an entity, that has a boundary, it has a name. Is your attention clear on what that boundary is and what makes up that entity? Because anything you don't hold in your awareness won't get the energy or information coming through. So being clear on, on the boundaries of whatever it is we're working with is really important, because that defines the container for the energy and information. It's like a river. It's if the banks are too tight, you've got lots of turbulence as the water flows through. But if they're too wide, then it just kind of goes and doesn't go anywhere. So it's how do you find the right width, breadth of the banks of the river, as it were, so that the energy can kind of flow at the right pace and things can unfold in a natural way. So that's really what that principle is about. And so it is. It's work for people who are grounded as well as kind of conscious.
Mhm.
It's not about floating off. It's about manifesting in this world that we chose to come into. For some reason, we didn't choose to stay in the subtle, or in the hang out with the angels or whatever. We chose to manifest here. So let's make the most of it. And let's learn the art of sitting in that space in the veil, and working with stuff as it comes through and turning it into form in a way that will be as most supportive of life as possible in that process. So that's what the principles are really designed to kind of just provide, that little bit of structure that helps bring the subtle into the manifest.
Mhm.
The other thing which just popped in was staying on this theme of bringing things through or bringing things in, is the importance of tension.
Mhm.
You think things move from the oneness into the yin yang, say, or the fire and the ice from the more Northwest European tradition. And so from the one to the two, the moment there's a two, there's a tension. And so it's how if we can, when we're sitting in the veil, we're holding the tension between present and potential the whole time. And so it's how you are able to hold those and not know exactly what it is that's going to emerge to transcend them, as it were. Hold tension, be curious. It's really in the physics. It's the wave, how you hold the wave open and don't collapse it. Now you can collapse it in two ways: one by polarizing and pushing the poles away from each other, and then you've lost the tension as well. Like, you move the magnets too far, there's no field. But if you collapse them too quickly, then you don't allow the potential that would transcend those polarities, as it were, to come in. So learning to sit with tension, not judge it, not be fearful of it, but be curious, is a key part of the art of leading from the field. And that's where all the shadow work and everything comes in, of course, because what tensions irritate you, or what tensions are hard to hold? Okay, why is that? And what is it in me that makes it hard for me to hold that particular tension, for example, and want to collapse it as soon as possible or run away from it? And language is funny, because a lot of this work is about intention, setting an intention. So what is that? That's putting something into tension. Intention, it's literally intention between now and the possible. so funny how these words are like always there for us, and then it's only after having seen them for 40 years you suddenly go, it's funny, intention and intention. Oh yeah. It's like the evolution, right? Where did this word come from? Evolution theory. I was sitting here one day, and the only kind of hunch I had was that evolutionary theory, including things like spiral dynamics and developmental theories, were just too linear. So there was something that it wasn't. They were limited somehow, and I was like, okay, I get. Yeah, so there's evolution, and then okay, and then involution adds to that. That's good. So coming out of the causal into the subtle into the gross is the involutionary process. Involution, evolution. But I guess they're both too linear, and they're not two processes. Like they must be just one thing happening at the same time. So I asked kind of the obvious question: what do involution, involution, and evolution have in common? And then it was obvious. It's like you take off the in and the air, and what are you left with? Volution. I was going, I wonder what that means. So kind of Google volution was it means spin. I'm kind of, oh well, that fits because that's exactly what the torus does. Torus is spinning. In fact, everything's spinning. The planet, our cells, the galaxy, everything is manifested through spin. Like that's the very manifestation process. And then when I came across Wyrd and looked into that, I found out that that also meant spin
Mm,
and also turned into the German word werden, which means to become.
mm,
Literally, it's the process of manifestation. And here we have this Wyrd with a Y, this ancient Anglo-Saxon Viking word, that got buried deep by the church because we didn't want people doing weird stuff. We needed to be in control of like this kind of manifestation process, as it were. Um, that's that's the essence of how you actually co-create with life, in the subtle fields. So it feels like the fact that we're rediscovering these old wisdoms uh, feels like an important part of the reintegration of stuff as well.
mhm,
Like in the evolution, I think, I talk about how in order to put your branches higher, you got to send the roots deeper or you fall over. And in sending the roots deeper, you encounter the trauma and the shadow that's holding the energy you need to take the next step forward. And so it's not tree doesn't grow like this, tree grows like this, as we do. Apparently in the womb, also from the heart. So the heart here, and then everything else kind of, yeah.
mm.
So yeah, that's why choosing Wyrd as the name and the brand as a way to kind of reclaim that from its current meaning, distorted meaning to mean strange, because it not at all. It's actually the core of the life process, manifestation process. Yeah. That's all fun and games. It's a lot of fun, when we remember, but it is. We don't get caught up in all the stuff.
I don't know how true this is, but I have a story that a lot of the coherence work and manifestation work and developmental human potential work has been largely individual focused.
Mm.
My own personal developmental journey, downloading my personal vision for my life, these kinds of things. And what I really enjoy about talking to you and reading you and getting to know you more is the curiosity and the exploration of collectives of an organization, of a system. I mean, of course, every individual is a collective. We all have our psychologically our parts or biologically our organs, all these kind of things. But there's, that being said, there's really something like let's not short play it here. We're looking at planetary civilizational level well-being and civilizational enlightenment and what kind of architecture and scaffolding needs to be set up both in the manifest and unmanifest to support thriving at a species level and at a interplanetary level. I mean, to really support humanity transitioning into the next wave of our unfolding as a inflection point move, not just an iteration, but a full-on uh, new world.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah, new one.
So yeah, it's a good point. Well noticed. Because like for some reason I've never been drawn to one-on-one coaching. I've never been drawn to doing one-on-one healing. It's always been the systems and the kind of collectives. That's for some reason my path. And yeah, be it the organizational stuff or the kind of energetic, which is about the fields in between us. This isn't about me or you, it's about what happens in the space between. And that, again, there we are again in this kind of collective field space. So yeah, it's true. It's true. That has been my journey this time for some reason. Yeah. It's the really, I think the question that I've sat with ever since. So my mother, who's a Quaker, gave me a copy of Fritz Schumacher's book Small is Beautiful when I was 22, 23 or something, which fundamentally questions like the nature of our economic systems and things like that. And since then, the quest has been how do we make the biggest possible positive impact with the least possible effort? Not from like a laziness perspective, but from a efficiency
Mhm.
perspective, what's kind of going on the planet and stuff. Where are these acupuncture points? That bridge point. What is it that's going to help the system tip into into the next phase of being, or humanity's role on the Earth, really, or you could say even like the Earth's next phase, because really, we are, which we often forget, we are the Earth. We're talking to itself right now, and really kind of the earth processing, okay, how am I going to, and is it possible for this experiment in self-awareness that I created, which is the human, is it possible to extend the experiment? Like, can we take it to the next level? Or is this experiment going to destroy so much of the rest of life, you know, in on and in me, that it'll just have to end and we'll have to try something else? You know, I mean, this is the, and when we're kind of holding that perspective, does a number of things. So one, it's like, oh yeah, remember, I'm not. It's not me and the earth. We're not saving the earth, as it were. We are quite literally the earth, trying to work out what its next iteration is going to be. And yeah, yeah. Whenever I often say that at the beginning of a talk or something, and always there's a certain energy enters the room at that point, and it goes very quiet, and you can feel people, like I say, like I'm the earth talking to itself right now, and you're the earth listening to itself, right? I mean, that's obvious, right? Take that in. And there's this stillness, you can feel it kind of dropping in. And of course, people ping out and everything again, but it's such a fundamental perspective to hold, and it's so bizarre that we've forgotten that we kind of have this assumption of separation. We talk about there's the earth and there's me, and yeah, well, no, actually, no, this natural intelligence of the earth is what created us, and that we are actually manifesting in every moment. It's the earth manifesting through us. And any alien would tell you that. I mean, they'd go, "Well, yeah, you guys, of course, you're Earthlings. I mean, just like the other animals and species on the planet." So that also helps, actually, I find. Yeah. So you're right. It's planetary evolution, but not us evolving the planet, but us evolving as the planet,
Mhm.
and therefore potentially interplanetary. okay, so how is this being of Gaia, of which we are a part, going to start to interface with, other beings, planetary beings that are out there? I got a really nice image the other day, which was I know we were on one of these UAP kind of calls, and somebody asked me a question, and the image I got was like, in the body, when the part of the body gets sick, the body sends, is it white cells, sends something to heal that part of the body. Well, if so, the body's a self-organizing system like that. The Earth is a self-organizing system like that. So isn't the galaxy as well self-organizing system like that? So if in the galactic body, let's say of the Milky Way, this little part, Earth, which is planet Earth, is sick, right? Then what's it going to do? It's going to send healing resources to that part of its body to help it heal. Is that what these aliens, well, non-Earth based life forms are? Is it the galaxy's kind of immune system kicking in and going, let's just help this little part of myself kind of get better?
I love the question. I love the question.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, well, yeah, let's extend this concept of Gaia as a living organism to what's the next level of boundary? Oh, yeah, Milky Way.
Mhm.
What they have found is that when during the Cold War and things, whenever any of the nuclear um, installations turned on, the weapons, the craft showed up and basically somehow shut them down. They kind of so
I've heard this. I've read this. Yeah.
yeah,
That when there was actually a chance of a nuclear strike happening, that extraterrestrial beings showed up and made it not possible, essentially.
yeah. They just reported these kind of craft appearing, and then the whole thing shut down. So, yeah, well, that's who knows. But it's a nice thought that maybe there's other life out there to help us through this transition, that we're also not alone.
Well, we know this now. I mean, in the US, the Pentagon just released hundreds of pages of documents stating, I mean, disclosing all kinds of information about UAPs and aliens and
And it's kind of, I remember when they passed the first Senate passed the first bill. It's like, okay, this is going to be big now, and then still doesn't get into. It's like we can't. It's such the implications are so huge. Like the Princeton work, like Bob Jahn, who was the dean of the School of Engineering at the time, he used to quote this, and he said, inverted commas, scientist, who came up to him one day and said, Professor Jahn, even if what you're saying is true, I wouldn't believe it.
Mm.
Well, that's not science.
But
But that's the issue.
but belief systems are so I want to double click on this because I'm curious about this. So one thing is developmentally, belief systems are pre-science. Right? Like you can look evolutionarily and see belief systems emerged before science did, and you saw what happened, right? Oh, the Earth's not the center of the solar system, the sun is. No, that doesn't match our belief. You have to die now, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what a belief is. There's no room for information that doesn't work with the belief. But I'm not sure that's what's happening in relationship to UAPs right now. My story is more along the thread of people are like most human beings that I talk to are like a browser with too many tabs open. Like they have that just color wheel spinning.
Or yeah.
And my story is like people just can't like we're just overwhelmed.
Don't
We're
have the bandwidth.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. We're both overwhelmed and we're underwhelmed at the same time,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Like we're overwhelmed by stuff by just information we don't care about and empty calories and
mm,
noise, but we're also underwhelmed. We don't have enough connection to stuff that truly matters for us and
yeah.
connection and things that feel satiating and fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I feel like for that reason, it's like in order to grok UAPs, there's a certain amount of throughput your system needs to be able to
Mm,
handle to even go there in your consciousness, to go there in your psychosomatic, neural, meaning making, relational system. And my story is just we're just like we, meaning human beings. Most of us just aren't there yet. We're like, just tell me if Trump ended it all today or not. Just like give me that kind of simplicity. Like,
You're right, and they go. You're right. They go hand in hand because if we don't have that kind of deeper sense of meaning, then we just create all sorts of stuff to distract ourselves. But the moment, when we start to kind of realize, wow, there is actually a whole new. This is why I think it's hopeful for the younger generation, who are so depressed at the moment. It's so sad, a lot of them think there was a research that showed like over 50% of young people think we're doomed, you know. It's
Mhm.
like, dude, how sad is that? And it was, but to realize that there is actually a fundamental perspective now emerging and a new kind of way of being, as it were, that means that, because I experience it myself, if I can get, you get caught up in it, and then you're kind of, and then you kind of take a breath and step back, and then you're actually, I don't need any of that. And that's the shift. It's a reorientation. It's like a re-anchoring of oneself that means that we focus on the things that are kind of important,
Right.
rather than all the clutter. So that's, in the image I got, one of the I walked to the Assisi path, pilgrim's path to Assisi with a group of men a couple of years ago. And one of the exercises we did was visiting your future self. It was really cool. So I got this image of my future self, and he was living in a world that was much simpler. There was actually a lot less clutter, like a lot of the stuff just wasn't there anymore, and yet we were kind of meeting our needs,
Mhm.
far more effectively.
Yeah.
And things were a lot simpler. In fact, the sentence I got was a consciousness-based consciousness civilization based on natural simplicity, joy, and grace.
Exquisite. I love it.
Thanks.
Was this with Peter Oppen Future?
No, there's a guy called Sujit Ravindran,
Okay.
Indian originally. Yeah.
There's another guy who's running the Future Self Institute and runs these kind of practices, so I thought it might be him. But I'll tell you, Peter, I have had these consciousness journeys. I wasn't on psychedelics or anything, but this one particular time I was in Lisbon and I started walking across the floor in the apartment that I was living in. And each time I took a step, I was moving into the future
Mm,
by increments of time. So I could go a year into the future, 5 years into the future, 25 years in the future. I forget exactly the increment. I mean, it's very clear why it was happening, and one of them was 25,000 years in the future. So I mean, there was quite a range of things, but I remember doing this several times and tasting them. And then the one I felt most drawn to was 5 years in the future. And I was standing in this lab. I call it a luminous lab
mm,
and running consciousness experiments and working with people. But I remember the feeling in my body was so foreign. I was going,
mm,
what is this feeling? Like this sensation that I feel, this sensation. What is this? And I had this moment, it gives me chills as I tell you about it right now. I had this moment of, oh my God, I'm surrounded by people and everyone has their needs met.
mm, mm,
It's like, it was like,
mm,
it was so uncomfortable. It was so unfamiliar. And then it was going, oh, this is the feeling I've always wanted to feel, like that everyone has their needs met. It's like the most unsafe feeling that I ever felt coming up from so much history of feeling unsafe in my life was safety. That was the most unsafe feeling I had ever felt was safety because it was like this, what is this? What is this feeling? I don't know what this is. What's going on? It's very similar. What's
Was it
that?
because it was unfamiliar? That's why it felt.
Yeah, it felt unsafe because it was going out of all the things I've ever felt, I've never felt this one. So this is this is terrifying. And then realizing, oh, this is what safety feels like. it was a similar thing in the future. Is
Yeah.
going, oh, what is a sensation? What is a sensation? Oh, this is the sensation of being in a group of people and everyone has their needs met. Like it was so foreign to my system. I mean, as far as I'm aware, that was the first time I've ever felt that feeling was being
Mm.
in the future and being surrounded in a group of people and just seeing these beings just emanating light and joy and spontaneous presence. And I mean, just was going, oh my God, like this is this is spectacular. And it's mind-boggling because it's available to us in this moment, and yet somehow it's in the future. Um,
Yeah. It's so simple. Things become so simple in that
Right.
context. Yeah, I found it really useful because if I'm kind of, I can just tune into that future self experience, and it brings me into the same zone. If I'm getting caught up in stuff, I'll just take a breath and then you know meet myself again in the future, and it's like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, it's all right, it's all right, it's all good.
Well, and there's something here. My meaning making is you were talking about the all the young folks who are so depressed,
Mm,
and there's something for me here in this. There's a couple of different variables. One is um, for me that feeling of depression oftentimes comes with a breakdown that's happening unacknowledged, right? I mean,
mm,
it's very obvious that systems and structures and institutions and ways of doing things all over the planet are just crumbling. And
mm,
we tend to try to perpetuate, like sustainability is, can we lengthen the amount of time something isn't working,
mm,
right? Can we make it work not, can we make it not work longer, right? Um, and so there's a way that we like what's happening in planet Earth right now invites us into a different relationship with breakdown, which is can we actually celebrate and welcome and love what's falling apart and hold the field of awareness where what's wanting to come online can
mm,
be born anew. And for me, there's that the depression of the breakdown unacknowledged and the natural process of grieving that
mm,
comes with that. I mean, especially in Western culture, our relationship with grief is just practically non-existent. So there's that realm. Then there can also be the depression of the repressed expression of what it is that actually wants to bubble up and come through. And there's the piece that I brought, which is that what we're most longing for, and that's already here in so many ways, we might feel the most terrified or resistance to experiencing because it's unfamiliar and we've never let it come online. So we can stay in our pattern or in what feels familiar, even if it's not what's actually safe or, um,
mhm.
uh, you know, um, I'm looking for a word, most satiating for us in our experience.
It's funny that you mentioned the meeting, having everyone's needs met was actually probably the very first book I wrote, 1996 or something, but never didn't publish for ages. And it was called Why Work? And it was actually about how we build local and kind of national, international economic systems that make sure everyone's needs are met. Very kind of simple. And looked at a lot of Ivan Illich's work and that kind of thing. And then suddenly, you know, 6, 7 years ago, everyone started talking about basic income again and local economies and parallel economies. And I was, oh, maybe I should actually get that book out. So it was actually one of the most read because I just had some stuff on a blog post. I hadn't got the book out. It was one of the most read blogs on my site, like in the tens of thousands. And it was a little image that showed how to build a local economy that would make it independent of the other economy, basically. And the book goes into a bit of philosophy at the beginning, and then the book goes into that. And so I put that out, and it really is that's the essence of it is what you described is being able to create a world where we're not dependent on anything else, where we haven't outsourced to the expertocracy, our health, our food, our whatever, but we've just built the systems to be able to meet our needs where we are with, the people around us. And it's so doable. Now I'm like, dude, it's like
Yeah.
Like everything's been economized. Everything's been like anything that we can have somebody else do so that money is generated to add to, gross domestic product. And everything gets outsourced, and suddenly we're like, well, we can't do anything ourselves anymore. And yet it's completely possible to do that. And it does feel to me that's part of the direction things are going on, is like as we develop our own kind of consciousness awareness, we become aware that actually I don't need, that. I don't need that, but I can kind of sense into this myself. And there's an interesting research that was done by a guy called John Peterson, who ran the Arlington Institute before 2012. 2012 was this big thing about the Mayan prophecy and things like that. And John went around and he interviewed all sorts of psychics, like well-established psychics, and he asked them what did they see the other side of 2012. And it was very, very diverse, except for one thing that they had in common, which was decentralized communities connected,
Hmm.
like internet and other things, but the collapse of a nation state, or the deep and the yeah the refocusing around
Yeah.
local decentralized communities, connected and communicating and being constructively with other communities. And that kind of stuck with me. I was okay, that makes sense, that's the direction like it would go. And everybody in that context, making sure everyone has their needs met, basically. We should be able to do it. I mean, we have everything. Like in the Netherlands, we have this day, which is the Orange Day. It's the
Right.
King's
Things
Day.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I spent a ton of time in the Netherlands. I love
Oh,
the
yeah.
Netherlands.
And people put all their stuff out on the street, that they're willing to sell for 50 cents or something. And the streets are just full of stuff that nobody wants anymore. It's like, wow, how do shops still kid us into buying more stuff?
Right. It's amazing, isn't it?
So
It's
I went, look at all this.
I have this experience everywhere I go in the world. I mean, I go to shopping malls. I'm like, how is any of this here? I'm convinced that 50% of the storefronts I see are like money laundering schemes. And I'm like, how? I just walk everywhere I go in the world. I'm like, how does this possibly exist as a business? There's no way enough people physically walk in this building and buy enough product for this to stay. It's like the Truman Show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I swear, I'm just like, this cannot be an actual business. Like,
Yeah, but you did mention one that I know we're kind of going to wrap in a minute, but you mentioned one other thing I want to come back to and emphasize is the grieving process, because I think it is really important. The moment that we do remember that we're the earth, and that's an inner experience, there's a whole load of grief there, because we then are kind of, oh my God, what have I done? What have we done? How could we have done this to ourselves and the rest of life? And I experienced that with a guy called John Seed, who runs the deep ecology processes that he developed with Joanna Macy. And it was a beautiful, beautiful process. Very lucky to get experience to that in my 20s. And that really set a strong foundation, because, going through that process and recognizing the pain that our lifestyle actually creates, and that's, I think, why we distract ourselves with all this stuff around us, because to go inside, suddenly there's all this it's all this pain, basically. And we have to go through a grieving process individually and collectively, I think, in the West. um, yeah, and otherwise it all stays very heady and
right, right.
ungrounded. And yeah, but that's what settles you back into the kind of being, as it were, reconnects us to the earth, to the feminine, to the body, all those things that we kind of cut off from in the West. Yeah.
And we have hundreds of thousands of years of history that one could argue we haven't metabolized yet. I mean,
Yeah.
war, genocide, human trafficking, I mean, just
Yeah.
all kinds of things that we haven't grokked yet and really. it's in our bodies, and we might not be conscious that it's in our bodies. Like we might not be aware that we're living our history in the moment. So it's curious if you look at every human being as a cell in a superorganism of humanity with 8 billion cells, and then you look developmentally at
Mm,
what are we, a 16-year-old teenager who's about to have a existential crisis and go, how did I even get here? And look back at its past and its upbringing and go, what in the world? I mean, there's how does humanity go to therapy and deal with its evolutionary history for us from 20 lifetimes ago? I mean, it's like we didn't do things that we still are living the in the echoes of. And
mm,
it's going to be interesting to see how we navigate that as a humanity.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe a good point to finish is this quote from Ken Wilber has this beautiful quote in Up from Eden, where he says, when the great mother is repressed, the great goddess is concealed.
Mm,
Great mother's repressed, the great goddess is concealed. And he's pointing to, like, if we repress that relationship to the earth, feminine, the body, we don't get access to the subtle,
mm,
all this great stuff that we've been talking about that will take us to the next level. And if we don't reintegrate, send those roots down and reconnect those early phases of our human development and remember that we're the earth, then we don't get to play with the great goddess. So yeah, it's both at the same time. Yeah.
well, thank you, Peter. This has been lovely, and I'm excited to see the feedback from our listeners and you know hear what it's like to hang out with us here today. So we'll be in touch. I know we've gotten to hang out a few times, and I'll ping you with some reflections from folks. People usually reach out after hearing episodes and share impact and things like that. So I'll circle back with you and let you know how it's landing with folks. And maybe this will be a part of a series on leading from the field, or maybe something else will happen. We'll see. But all that to say, thank you so much. This has been really fun for me. I'm grateful for you and the tremendous work you're doing and the well of wisdom you are. It's great being with you.
Thank you, Forrest, and thank you for holding space in this way. It's unusual, podcast, and the moments of silence are the kind of beautiful moments, really. So it was. What do you call it? From the you don't
Uh,
say from.
field first podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
That's first. It's good stuff. It's actually the form reflects the content, which is unusual. Thank you.
Hey, be well.
So